Welcome, everyone, to Lessons from the Field. This is a series of interviews, as you know, where we have a diverse array of guests who all have a common thread, a passion for pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences. And today we're very lucky to have Kathy Pham, who is a graduate of our PGY1 residency program in 2004. Before that, she finished her pharmacy schooling at Rutgers, and she's now the Director of Policy and Professional Affairs at the American College of Clinical Pharmacy and based in the Washington, D.C. office. And I'll be asking Kathy a number of questions to elucidate insight from her for our guests on their careers and experience and how her experience can benefit those. So let's go ahead and get started. Kathy, if you would start with just telling us kind of what you've done since you left our residency program.
Sure thing. Well, upon leaving the residency program, which I didn't want to do, I really wanted to do the PGY2 with Donna Kraus there. But, you know, one of my co-residents had been able to pursue that opportunity, and I had intentions of doing a PGY2. I always had, but an opportunity presented itself to go to the Arnold and Marie Schwartz College of Pharmacy at Long Island University, and it was a blend of pediatrics and adult internal medicine, which at the time, with my goal of being board certified, or BCPS was what was available to me then, I thought that would be a great fit. And I always wanted to teach. I had done the teaching certificate with Brad Cannon. And so that was a really strong passion of mine, was to go into pharmacy education. I did go there and realized quite quickly that you cannot stay on top of the literature as much as you'd like when you're doing both adult internal medicine and pediatric pharmacotherapy. So for my own sanity, I had to figure out how I was going to narrow my bandwidth and start to, know things deeper. I also started feeling like I was referring to a lot of my patient care experience from my residency days and not so much from my days as a clinical assistant professor. So that was how much it seemed to remove me, I think, from the day-to-day clinical experience. And I didn't want to feel like my clinical growth was slowing that early in my career. So I left to go to pursue a fully hospital-funded position at St. Joseph's Medical Center in Paterson, New Jersey. So still in the New York area, back in my home state where I was already licensed, having graduated from Rutgers, but now I could just focus on being a pediatric clinical pharmacist. And I always thought that I would go back into teaching. I think that move was really more that I felt I would be a better teacher by first being an effective clinician. And that was really the goal of gaining that full clinical pharmacist experience without necessarily as much of the teaching component embedded into the full-time position. So from there, I realized actually of all the pediatric pharmacotherapy needs, that neonatology was what I was most excited about. So throughout my career, I just pursued things that would fall more into focus with what I felt, I was pulled to. So I was given the opportunity to be a NICU clinical specialist at Children's National Medical Center, formerly known as DC Children's, for those who are familiar from years prior. And that also allowed me to be a residency coordinator, which was also my ultimate career goal. And I thought that's how I would retire. I would be a NICU clinical specialist and a residency director, and I would be golden. And I did become a residency director a couple years into that experience. And then, you get restless again. One thing that I think pushed me with each career change was getting to the point where I felt comfortable and still craving a way to grow. And it didn't always have to be in a specialty area or whatever the case was. It was just a way to develop a different skill set that I hadn't felt like I'd really mastered. And so while I was at Children's National, as you can imagine, it being in Washington, D.C., you kind of get bit by the policy bug a little bit, even unintentionally. So I found myself, through pharmacy organization work, just taking on more opportunities outside my day job and really working in more of the advocacy space. And being in D.C., I could also meet with stakeholders in the D.C. area a little bit easier than some of my organization colleagues that lived elsewhere. So I think it was being in the right place at the right time, and also having the passion for advocacy. So also having the trust of my peers to represent our viewpoints. And from there, I was actually on the FDA Pharmacy Compounding Advisory Committee, and having sat on that, a few times a year, we would meet in the DC area, and I often would sit next to the director of public health programs at the Pew Charitable Trust. And somewhere in the midst of that experience, I guess I represented myself well enough to have them at the end of 3 years ask me if I wanted to come work for Pew, which was a very unique offer, and it took a lot of asking mentors and colleagues to see if I was ready for this leap. But that was my first departure from my clinical career, and I haven't really looked back since. A year at Pew, and then this opportunity at ACCP came along, and it was really my opportunity to speak in my natural voice again, which I can elaborate on later. But it's just been nice to be able to just speak on behalf of advancing clinical pharmacy practice. I mean, that is something that I lived it, I breathed it. I really am genuine about the policy approaches that we advocate for, and I always say, like, I'm the best salesman when I believe in the product. So in this case, just being able to make those arguments as to why policy should advance in a way that aligns with advancing clinical pharmacy practice is just very natural to me.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for reviewing all that with us. Yeah, it's quite a trajectory, and sounds like you've really done well. So a lot of our students, especially when they're still in school, but maybe early after they graduate, when we do these, they really want to know more of the details of what a job involves, because they're interested in perhaps that career or get into something similar. So could you tell us more about like the day-to-day activities, your typical day or week?
Yeah, I think that a lot of my peers in association management will say, you never know what tomorrow brings. Every day can look different, and that's kind of the intrigue of going into that world and that space. But I would say that categorically, I do activities facing three stakeholder groups or member groups. That's our ACCP members, that's the colleagues within our profession, and then there's those stakeholders outside of our profession. And I would say that most of my work is facing those three audiences. Obviously, for our members, it's being able to explain ACCP's advocacy positions, communicating ACCP's strategies and the parts of the strategic plan that relate to advancing and positioning clinical pharmacists more broadly, trying to also be a resource to them should they have policy or practice advancement questions that maybe our organization can direct them to that would help make the case for what it is that they're trying to advance. I would also say that just helping to uplift and make our expert members more visible in the policy space. We've had some great collaborations with various groups outside of the profession where if I can make medication optimization relevant to the conversation, I can then usually recommend an ACCP member expert to participate in a call or present about their work, or even just talk about their practice model a little bit more. To do, what the joke is, we have a hard time sometimes even explaining to our parents what we do in clinical pharmacy. And that still is the case, even when you're talking about, healthcare reform more broadly. It's about trying to explain to those stakeholders what we do and how that's different than what their assumption of pharmacy practice would be.
Yeah.
I would also say that in terms of day-to-day, just if there are opportunities to comment, either in the congressional space or just other interorganizational policy documents, we'll create comments. We recently actually submitted comments to the upcoming PCORI national priorities, which will inform the PCORI research agenda. So examples like that, CMS, HHS, anything that comes out that might warrant ACCP weighing in. I would, myself and John McGlew really lead those efforts. And then I always like to say that at the end of the day, my job is to make people want to work with us. So really building partnerships and collaborations and just being at the table where our voice is most relevant.
Yeah, excellent. Well, you obviously have a lot of passion for what you do, whether it's when you were a clinician or now in your role in advocating for the profession. But maybe I know the answer to the next question, but during your career so far, I mean, what has given you the most satisfaction?
I definitely would say my time as the residency program director at Children's National Medical Center. When I arrived there, the PGY1 was going under reaccreditation, and it had a lot to work on. And then upon my arrival, I immediately identified that program as a program that should really be offering a PGY2, just from the level of expertise amongst their preceptors and the environment, the team-based environment that even the medical staff really appreciated clinical pharmacist contributions. So to create a new PGY2 program there and to watch it grow rapidly from 2 PGY1 residents to a combination altogether 6 between PGY1 and PGY2, 6 residents a year. That, I've seen 40 pharmacy residents graduate in my time there within, I guess it was 8 years.
Yeah,
of seeing those classes grow and matriculate. So it's still my pride and joy and being able to impart what it means to be a part of that Children's National legacy, and hoping that your residents that graduate will also stay connected with each other and be a resource to one another. And, just having that sort of legacy that you leave behind, that you've trained a group of clinicians that will then go forward and train other clinicians, and the way that they will hopefully mentor those clinicians, the way that you hope that they received your mentorship well. I think that I try to always be a very positive, nurturing mentor. And I think that sometimes that model, I think sometimes there are certain environments that are very hard and intense. And I think that you can still be nurturing and still learn a lot and grow a lot. So I hope that that's the legacy that we left behind at Children's National.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it is. It's quite impressive, the number of people, and I'm sure all of the outcomes of their work, all the patients that they interact with, and other pharmacists. But I guess speaking of residencies then, maybe thinking back to your time here at UIC and when you were in our residency program, what was it from the program that helped you prepare? I mean, obviously there's the clinical training that you took a long way, but were there other things in that program that really helped you prepare or pave the way for you in your career?
Yeah, and I think that it's one of those things that people either love it or hate it. But I always say I would go back and go back to being PharmD on call any day. I, for some reason, enjoyed that experience so much, and it was probably because at the time there was nothing like it close to me.
Mm-hmm.
In New Jersey, I think that there was still a growth of clinical pharmacy happening from New Jersey-based hospitals. You saw most of the clinical positions being faculty positions, and it was just you were starting to see hospitals start investing in hiring their own clinical pharmacists, but it was not at the same level of infrastructure as the UIC system. And so just being in the UIC health system and having that experience of thinking so independently and still having the right resources available to you. But I think I learned pretty quickly, or had to learn pretty quickly, what I knew, but also the limitations of what I knew, and be comfortable with that. I don't think I realized till later, like if someone had asked me this question even 5 years ago, I would say, the best thing I got out of UIC is my learn by doing level of independence from PharmD on call and the confidence I gained from going through that experience. Now I would actually say the thing that I grew most from and take with me throughout my career is the ability to be comfortable with change. And to be okay being uncomfortable, because it probably means you're growing and that you're continuing to evolve and you're not remaining stagnant. Yeah.
Wow. That's some good words of experience and really advice too for people. Thank you. Obviously our residency program has a reputation in the way that you've mentioned it. And a lot of people that have gone through that, I think, feel the same way. But maybe turning the table just a little bit, maybe I'd like to ask you about, as a woman in pharmacy and in a leadership role in one of the top organizations in the profession, ACCP, who is interacting obviously with not only members, but, legislators and so many others. How does that impacted you personally, and I guess other comments that you might have on that?
Yeah, I feel like I did not really acknowledge what an opportunity this was and what it would mean to not just females, but minority females. I think, I've grown up in an era where it seemed like most of my pharmacy class and most of the pharmacy profession is female. But then to not necessarily see that same ratio of women in leadership or in professional organization leadership, I've really only become sensitive to that in the last few years. I think that for me, it was always just about be the best mentor you can be, regardless of whether you're male or female. And now I think I have a different drive behind representing women in leadership and in pharmacy leadership specifically well. And I remember at my first annual meeting, ACCP annual meeting, after becoming the Director of Policy and Professional Affairs, that I had female colleagues come up to me and say, it's so great to see you in that position, not just me personally, but that someone who represents so many other faces of the profession, for them to, and you hear it now a lot more because of our conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it does mean something to have someone in a position that looks like you. I mean, I think we even saw that with Suni Lee in the Olympics and what that did for women's gymnastics. I think just inspiring a generation that currently works so hard, and then to know, wow, so Kathy Pham made it to the ACCP central offices. I think that I can only hope that I'm doing this job well enough to represent that. But it does sometimes feel like, I wouldn't say it's a burden, but sometimes there is a little bit of pressure, like, don't mess this up. You represent a lot of other faces like you. So I'm just really proud that I am populating one more seat with a woman in pharmacy leadership. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I'm sure that there's many looking up to you. Speaking kind of in the same vein, then, you're advocating for women, you're advocating for the profession. What got you interested in advocacy itself? Was it something that just came out of your time in Washington, D.C., or is there other things that motivate you?
I think that being in pediatric pharmacy practice, there's always an inherent quality that drives you towards being a good advocate. I mean, it starts with being an advocate for your patient, and then you grow into being an advocate for your patient population. And I didn't know that the same skill sets I would need trying to explain to P&T why I need this one drug on the formulary, or why that syringe won't work on that pump. Systematically, I think that skill set of explaining something that doesn't inherently make sense to someone because they just didn't realize that was a consideration, that's worked for me quite well in the broader advocacy space. I'm now, instead of the P&T chair, my audience is a legislator or a policymaker or a payer, to explain to them why they might not inherently understand the value of comprehensive medication management or advanced clinical pharmacy practice, but let me explain to you why this is needed, where the opportunities are, and why you should consider it. So there's a lot of parallels, I guess, in terms of communication skills and using data and evidence to inform that approach or to inform that change. It's very, I think pharmacy students don't always see that correlation as well, that the same skill sets they are learning to be a good clinical pharmacist very much are skill sets more broadly applicable to being a great communicator, to being a policy influencer. You're using data and informing the opinions of those who don't necessarily get it from the start. So hopefully, and also having the tact, being able to convince someone on the team why this change is the right decision, that also, that communication skill set is also really valuable in the DC space. But I think that my passion really it was unintentional, or my advocacy path was unintentional. I think it was just something I was used to, and then I found different ways to engage, different opportunities were given to me, and then I realized that after a while, and this is that changed a few, was I realized that maybe not everybody sees that or builds that skill set or is confident in that skill set, and that if you're able to translate all of this technical pharmacy speak to an outside audience, that's kind of something that I should probably run with, a little bit of a superpower that I should probably take advantage of. So that's really how I think I landed it, because I thought it was my professional duty to utilize these skills in a way that advances the profession.
Yeah, well, you're clearly doing that. Well, thank you. I guess maybe, again, turning the tables a little bit, you're in a great position being with ACCP and be able to see what's happening, not just in the profession, like, at the cutting edge, but also in healthcare and in politics and so forth. So do you have any words of advice for our students who are trying to plan their careers and looking to the future, trying to understand what the profession will look like, say in 5 or 10 years when they're out and starting their careers like you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me to be in the very last class at Rutgers that still was offered the BS Pharm, the Bachelor's in Pharmacy, the 5-year program, and the PharmD, I think that even that was an illustration of making the choice that will always set you up to be ahead, not behind.
Yeah.
So whether that's going for the residency training, acquiring the board certification, remaining credentialed, doing the things that set you apart from your peers, I think that you just need to sort of be prepared for where practice will advance and what the skill set and qualifications will be to be able to practice that way. And even if it's something that you may not realize you need tomorrow in your day job, I think that when you're ready to sit for those opportunities, you try to take all those opportunities to continue to, at this point, even remain competitive to your peers, let alone stand apart from them. So, I think with the way that we hope to see healthcare reform going and advancing team-based care as hopefully in general healthcare moves more towards a value-based payment system, I do think that will hopefully create more opportunities for clinical pharmacy practice and team-based care that I think our students would love to practice in those environments. I think we just don't have enough opportunities yet because it's still somewhat nascent. We don't have, unfortunately, the sustainable financial models yet, but that's my part of my job is, we're looking for payment reform that will incentivize more opportunities for our students to be able to pursue. But I also think that, the way that we deliver care might be changing, and we saw it this past year or two with the very quick pivot to telehealth out of necessity. I mean, that's an example of something that was crawling towards change, and then, the game changer happened. So I'm really excited to see, and I think that this generation of graduating students also will excel in that space and hopefully even see some more innovative approaches for using telehealth to provide good quality pharmaceutical care. Yeah.
Well, I loved your answer to that. I mean, we can't necessarily predict the future. There might be some things that we can point to as probably happening, but as long as we are prepared for any opportunities that come up, we're going to be better off. So I really think that's good advice. As we wrap this up, Kathy, I wonder if there are any other words of wisdom or advice that you might have for our students or early graduates who might be interested in following a path like yours?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same advice that was given to me by UIC faculty when I was a resident, that don't worry so much about exactly what you want to do. I think that, and I am a type A pharmacist. If there's any type A pharmacist, it's a neonatal clinical pharmacist who's micromanaging to the decimal point. So, of course, I would love to map out a specific plan to get from point A to point B. But your life and your career will not go in that straight path necessarily, and you will have to embrace opportunities and change as they come. But I think that when you don't focus so much on exactly what that end goal is. Figure out what you don't want to do. You can eliminate those from the list. And then that leaves you open to a lot of different possibilities of what you would want to do. And, you know, you can remain a little bit more flexible in your career path. I think that, you know, when students are thinking about applying for residency, they feel like they have to pitch this perfect plan. Like, this is exactly why I'm your perfect resident, because I planned this whole career path and you're exactly what I need to get there, et cetera, et cetera. And that's important for that part of the process. But I think in general, you know, if you love critical care, but you don't like oncology, or you know, there's various things that I think you have the ability to be a little bit broader in your interests. Mm-hmm. It's more important to just eliminate the things that would not make you happy and be more open to the various possibilities then that will present themselves to you in the future. That you're like, yeah, I could do that or that. I like them both. What a great thing is to be able to have a choice, because you left your interests a little bit more open.
Yeah. Well, that is fantastic advice. Thank you, Kathy. This has been a lot of fun. Appreciate you taking the time to come back and do this with us, and hope we see you. We'll be seeing you actually soon in DC. I know we have an event scheduled there, so I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. So yes, thank you.
It's still on the calendar.
Thank you so much.